and he may not even be able to stay on for the full term as Prime Minister, it increasingly feels like. I mean, what do you think? Has he still got it in him to hang on?
I mean, if he does, he's a big man than me, because it just must be brutal. He is presiding over a government in complete crisis after, a year and a half of power? That is not a very long time. You should still be sort of in your pomp a little bit.
This is The Capitalist, presented by CapX.
Joe, what a year.
Tumultuous, you might say.
Well, let's start by casting our minds back all the way to January and the second inauguration of Donald Trump, which was a moment of great excitement, I think, looking back. There was a certain naivety to it, perhaps, but I remember there was palpable energy. He came in, a clean sweep for the Republicans, a lot of power, a lot of ideas, a sense that there was possibility around, and that in particular Elon Musk leading the Doge initiative, Department of Government Efficiency, that was going to cut back spending. And then things sort of became much more complicated in office. Do you think that was always inevitable?
Well, I don't know. You're right, though. There was lots of very powerful optimism in January around Project Trump 2.0, particularly on the British right as well. I think a lot of people saw him and they thought, right, this is a blueprint. We may not agree with everything, but this is a blueprint for how we can just kind of get stuff done.
Doge too, I remember.
Yeah.
Everyone was springing up their own UK Doge things. And of course that carries on with Reform UK now. There's sort of
they've got the local government stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think there was always... I mean, this is kind of incidental to the Doge stuff, I suppose, but there was always a bit of a concern about how two big personalities like Trump and Musk would get along. But then when it came to establishing Doge, as you said, lots of great rhetoric around it, good principles, trimming the size of government and the scope of the state. But then, as you say, it hasn't really brought about a massive massive decrease in federal spending. And we had Mani Bashazad writing for us a little while ago about why Doge failed. And I think he sort of hit the nail on the head, it seems like anyway, when he said that while Musk was able to reduce headcount, what he didn't do is actually reduce the scope of what these government agencies were able to do. So they still did all of this cumbersome stuff, just with fewer people.
Yeah, I think, there's a sense in which the right has to be very careful of not wanting easy answers. There's plenty of people on the left who want easy answers economically, and it's always tempting to go, well, it's all right. There's bound to be some easy cuts that we can make. It's all just really inefficient government, so we're bound to be able to do it. But if you look at the numbers, you've got to look at entitlement spending, you've got to look at welfare, you've got to look at the hard things. And that's where the politics gets difficult. You can't just come in and assume, there's loads of money we can just get rid of. And I think Reform UK is maybe starting to think that way. And they found that in the councils, haven't they?
They found that in, which council was it? Was it Kent?
Yeah, I think it might have been.
Yeah. I think it might have been Kent. They sort of got there and realised, bugger. I've talked a really great game about cutting all of this waste from the council, and there's not all that much I can kind of like foreseeably and sort of realistically cut. And there's lots of concerns I think that people have that the reform Doge stuff will end up being quite performative and won't actually save that much money, won't sort of make local services run more efficiently, and might just sort of boil down to bringing down pride flags from the tops of flat-roofed council buildings, which I think it speaks to what you were talking about. It's very easy in politics to get excited about things that confirm our biases.
Yeah.
And then sort of once people are propelled to power in such a way, they start to, they're confronted by the grim political kind of actualities. And it all just becomes a lot harder and a lot more opaque.
Yeah. Well, and then turning to another thing that, of course, one of the iconic moments for Trump was his stuff on tariffs, Liberation Day, when he stood there with that extraordinary placard showing all the sort of tariffs that he'd worked out, or the unfair trade terms that America was facing. It was just a remarkable moment when, America, which has been a key plank in the world free trading order, was just like saying, there is a new sheriff in town, things are really changing. And this is something he's always really believed in. And I suppose, what do you think? the best one can say is that it's not been as bad as people worried at the time, because he's sort of rode back from the most extreme versions of it. But it was quite a massive shift.
It was a stunning shift, and that was peak Trump. It was so camp, so game show. The way he stood next to that board, his kind of Ascension Island, his 50% tariffs. But you're
tariffs on the penguins. I remember
tariffs on the penguins. Yeah, it's the whole thing kind of smacked of absurdity. But it was really shocking, as you say, because it marked this paradigmatic shift in the global kind of trading order. America has traditionally been very much pro-free trade, and that's the sort of thing that it encourages around the world. But then, you're right, he rode back on some of the major ones. But now, of course, the future of his tariff regime sort of might hang in the balance a little bit.
Oh, with the Supreme Court case.
Yes. Sort of what that means for the year ahead. Because if the Supreme Court rules that the tariff regime was illegal, what does that do to his entire economic offering?
Yeah, and it matters to the UK too, because as I understand it, we had Sarah Elliott writing about this for us, getting into the detail.
Yes.
So, of course, he came over for the state visit to the UK, another big moment. There was lots of sort of sucking up, and even Keir Starmer, to be fair to him, has worked out that you got to suck up to Trump to get some things.
Yeah.
But the trade deals that were done, or the sort of trade agreements, were based on the same rules that are now in question in the Supreme Court case. So if those tariffs under that justification go, so do all the special carve-outs for the UK that he's done as a sort of special relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
So, it'll all come back to bite us too.
Oh, yeah, and it's very messy. And you sort of wonder what... So he's apparently raised $200 billion so far from the tariffs.
Was a sort of seen and unseen loss. In the end,
right.
This is a tax on American consumers. It's
exactly
it's crippling businesses.
You wonder when this is going to kind of drip down into the pockets of American consumers, and the costs are passed on in the form of high prices.
Well, one thing that he's had to do recently, because it's, Trump at least, he's ideological in a way, but he's also quite pragmatic if he sees things not going his way. Is they've given exemptions on tariffs to a whole bunch of grocery items, like food and drink items, because food inflation is starting to feed through as these tariffs inevitably push prices up for Americans, and that does not go down well. And he came in promising that he was going to bring down the cost of groceries. So this is a simple word, but it was going against food inflation was a big part of what he stood for. But of course, he's done the opposite. So he has had to make a lot of exemptions. But whether all of this is going to come back to him, and of course, thinking to the year ahead. Well, midterms coming up, Trump's popularity on the line. He loves to be popular, but whether in the end he can dissociate his tariff policies from the things that they cause that people don't like, and people's mind remains to be seen.
Yeah, it does, and you sort of wonder as well. At what point does Trump become yesterday's man in the minds of a lot of American voters? He is still exciting and braggadocious, but on the left in America now, there are figures like Gavin,
Newsom,
of California, who is kind of very punchy, very, very robust in a kind of Trumpite way. And you wonder, sort of, as the Democrats sort of start to learn to do Trumpism blue, what this is going to mean for him. And then particularly if the tariffs are struck off by the Supreme Court, I imagine there'll be a lot of very angry, very disappointed Trump voters out there.
But, he's still remarkably for a man of his age, because he is, he's not Joe Biden, but he's
very spry.
He's very spry, but he is an old man. But he's, maybe because he knows he only has so much time before the lame duck thing kicks in, he's still a man on the move. We had the national security strategy come in just the other day. Now, in the UK and in Europe, people have been very exercised about that, because it basically says, Europe, you're going to stand on your own 2 feet. We are not as interested in you anymore. We're going to row back, which is a big change in that relationship with Europe. So it's a vast change for what that means for NATO and so forth. But also at the same time, news today, increasing indications that he may go to war with Venezuela.
Yeah.
Which is part of that strategy, because his new Monroe Doctrine, he wants to, have America really see its sphere of influence as the Americas, and he doesn't want Maduro in power there, allying with China and Russia. And Trump continually surprises and makes the news, which is why we're talking about him, even though we're based in the UK, so we can't escape from his influence over us.
No, we can't. And you're right. He is kind of like a fundamentally unpredictable figure because he backs himself, and that is the core of his ideology: is sort of Trump winning. And that can mean many different things at many different times. He's not a man wedded to logical consistency in his views, and also we've seen sort of when peace deals and talks break down, he becomes incredibly personally abusive to different parties. Sort of how he's dealt with Putin recently, how he dealt with Netanyahu over Gaza. He becomes perturbed really quickly and can sort of shift his entire sort of geopolitical strategy with what seems like sort of the flip of a coin. But you're right, and this is sort of Starmer's challenge. These are the challenges that all European leaders face: is navigating that unpredictability. And as I said earlier, Starmer's quite good at it.
Yeah,
he knows how to play sycophant.
Yeah, well, he's good at foreign policy. I think, we were going to sort of grade him. You'd have to say he probably gets like, an A or something close to it for his foreign policy. He's handled Trump very well. He's quite good on the world stage. He's obviously more comfortable there. Domestic politics, though, let's talk about that now.
Yes.
It's a failing grade. It's got to be. He's came in with this massive majority, and he's just constantly being on the back foot. He can't assemble a political narrative. He can't come across as a human being, and he may not even be able to stay on for the full term as Prime Minister, it increasingly feels like. I mean, what do you think? Has he still got it in him to hang on?
I mean, if he does, he's a big man than me, because it just must be brutal. He is presiding over a government in complete crisis after, a year and a half of power? That is not a very long time. You should still be sort of in your pomp a little bit. A year and a half in. I mean, I think we both were a little bit cautiously optimistic about what Labour might do on planning.
Yeah, growth.
Exactly. Yeah, growth. They're going to be pro-business.
Didn't last long.
No, and that's the thing. Sort of, it's just so depressing how quickly they just collapsed in on themselves and just fell back into the same old instincts that have plagued Labour for years, which is anti-competition, pro-regulation, pro-union, pro-high tax. Not necessarily because it's going to raise a lot of revenue, but it's just the sort of thing that people on the left do. Wealth equals bad. Redistribution equals good.
I think the failure of the welfare reforms, which weren't even very big, but, were sort of symbolic, that was a sign that in the end, despite having this big majority, they couldn't control their backbenchers. They were going to lose too much political capital if they did, and that they couldn't get that through. That was a sign that they were just going to be pushed around on everything.
Oh, yeah. And we even saw it before the big welfare bill with the fracas over winter fuel payments, which wouldn't even have touched the sides of.
But that was bad political judgment as well. There
was no point.
They pushed it out as a symbolic thing, but they just alienated a lot of their base over something that was relatively trivial. They should have maybe folded it into something. It was supposed to look tough, Rachel Reeves, we've been talking about Starmer, Rachel Reeves also not having a great year.
Oh, no. Having a shocking time.
A shocking time of it. But that was her thinking, I'm going to show my party who's boss.
Yeah.
Oh, she found out who was boss.
Yeah, the pensioners. Rachel Reeves, she's just had a torrid time, and the political furore over the budget recently has just confirmed so much of what I think a lot of people were always suspicious of about politics, that they're in it for themselves, they're in it for their party, they're not in it for them, they're not in it for their manifesto pledges. They are there to kind of perennially barely cling on to a majority, and that's what drives them.
And yet at the same time, a lot of people, me I guess included, would look at them and say, but they're probably the best you're going to get on that side of things at the moment. The bond markets get very upset when Rachel Reeves looks like she might go.
Yeah.
Because it's the further left of the Labour Party that come in. And of course, the other fascinating thing, which we must talk about, is what's happened on the further left, the new parties of the left. The splintering. I mean, well, first of all, your party, which looked like it was going to be leading that charge, and then completely just fell about in the sort of classic sort of radical left internecine warfare with Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. But now Zach Polanski, with the Greens sort of rebadged as the party of wealth taxes, really quite something.
Yeah, it's remarkable because the Greens, outside of Brighton and Bristol, have been a fairly inconsiderable political force until recently, and now Polanski has them polling pretty well. I'm not entirely convinced that'll hold. I like to think it won't. I like to think that people might actually take a forensic view of wealth taxation and maybe his more laissez-faire policies towards migration and think, maybe that's not exactly what Britain needs at the moment.
But in the same way that, Brexit Party before Reform UK saw it very much as sort of ginger group to lead the Tories towards policies that it wanted.
Yeah.
It's only going to make Labour more left-wing on economics in order to keep those voters that it's otherwise going to hemorrhage in that direction. Surely, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I do, and I think we've already seen the start of that. The rowing back on the welfare stuff, giving into their more socialist backbenchers on tax. They're already being moved in that direction, but no one's going to buy it. The people who are going to vote for the Green Party, I'm not convinced, will then look at Keir Starmer and think, oh yeah, he's got a bit of Polanski in him. No, they will be seen, I'm certain, as the right saw Labour when they were sort of doing the kind of pale imitation of the Conservatives and Reform, when they were starting to talk tough on migration, starting to kind of talk about business in a very positive way and this kind of thing. No one really bought it. And this is kind of the problem that Labour has now. They've sort of forgotten themselves. They've forgotten the purpose of their government, and they're just kind of reduced to pale imitations of the far left or the sort of harder right.
Yeah, well, let's turn to the right, because you mentioned Reform. And of course, there's splintering on both sides going on. The biggest story politically of the year, arguably, is the rise of Reform UK, which has perhaps sort of plateaued for the moment, but it's up at around 30% of the vote. It's ahead in all the polls. It's just a remarkable achievement. I mean, do you think that they're starting to turn into a party that could actually win an election?
I mean, they seem to be professionalising. I was at their conference a little while ago, and they had lots of
there were eccentric moments in that.
Bloody eccentric moments when Andrew Jenkins went on stage dressed as a disco ball. It was absurd. But they had lots of kind of fringe events where think tanks would come together and talk about the kind of densities and intricacies of various complicated policy areas. That sort of stuff. There's now a think tank that's been established to kind of do the hard thinking on policy, because that's something that Reform has lacked in its offering recently, is a coherent vision for economic growth at the moment. As we, again, go back to the winter fuel stuff, it sort of reveals an instinct within them that is the same kind of declinist, high-spend instinct that plagued the Conservatives for such a long time.
Yeah. They sort of lean both ways, don't they, Reform? There's some potential. I mean, Farage himself, really a Thatcherite at heart, or certainly in his origins.
Indeed.
Like today, I think Zia Yusuf out saying, we'll get rid of stamp duty on shares, which is something the Centre for Policy Studies has long been advocating, makes a lot of sense, might even pay for itself, a tax like that. But then at the same time, Reform was in favour of Labour's decision to reverse the two-child benefit cap.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, lots of competing instincts at the moment, because sort of a lot of the votes they're trying to win, they are not your traditional free marketeers. They're not your buccaneering Thatcherites.
No.
These are sort of fairly high state, NHS spending and tough on law and order.
Yeah. But then the Conservatives still just about hanging in there. I mean, appalling in the polls still. Kemi Badenoch had a terrible year for most of the year, but after the conference, she gave the performance she needed to. People start to have a bit more faith. Yeah. She's had some good performances in PMQs, did well against Keir Starmer in the budget. But of course, none of this has really shifted the polls that much, although Labour's continued to fall, so Conservatives are sometimes now in second place to Reform, but nowhere near them in the polls. Do you think Kemi's done enough to sort of hang on for the moment?
I really hope she keeps up the momentum. As you say, she didn't have the greatest start to this year. It was pretty brutal. And I mean, lots of people were speculating on the right about whether she'd be ousted and replaced by this point, which hasn't happened, though. Since Tory Party conference, she seems to have kind of developed real confidence in the role. She announced some great policies, which a lot of people were sort of waiting for and encouraging her to start doing, leaving ECHR, abolishing stamp duty, this kind of stuff, their fiscal golden rule, and all this jazz, and is being really robust with Rachel Reeves in the Commons and Keir Starmer, which is great to see. And you wonder, sort of, as stories of Farage's youth continue to sort of come out of the woodwork and maybe spook those southern voters, maybe people might think a bit more kindly towards Tories.
Yeah, well, all eyes down for the May local elections when all of the parties will sort of be under close scrutiny. We will wait to see. Well, look, we're going to have to leave this, Joe. We could talk about 2025 all day. There was so much that happened. Well, let's just end quickly with what's your iconic moment of the year?
For me, it's no competition. It's Rachel Reeves's tough day when
in the Commons.
In the Commons, when she wept less than a year in to have a chancellor crying in the dispatch box, sort of less than a year into a government whose whole raison d'etre was improving the economy, is just a catastrophic allegory for this premiership.
Yeah. It was supposed to be over personal reasons, wasn't it? But it doesn't matter. Somehow it stands for everything that Labour's sort of disastrous.
The exasperation, the helplessness, the kind of supine attitude to change is sad. How about you?
How about me? Well, I was going to say, we've already talked about it, Liberation Day. It's just that image of Trump with the board, which is an extraordinary thing, and I think did reshape the world in many ways. But actually, I'm going to say something that's a bit off-piece, less political. There was in the AI country in the country music charts, an AI generated song and artist came top. It was number one for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, no. I don't remember that.
Yeah, no, and AI doesn't always get a lot of attention in Westminster. Everyone's very busy with the things that are going on in politics, but AI has been, I think, the sort of the background story of the year. This enormous tech development that is just quietly getting better and better and changing things. And the fact that something like that can happen, that people can actually prefer to listen to an AI track than something that's done by a person, is just in itself just a fun story. But I think it's one of those moments, and we may look back in 2026 when the AIs are doing something a bit more complicated and go, oh,
this was the beginning of something.
Yeah.
Are we doomed or are we saved? I don't know.
Watch this space.
Indeed.
Well, we shall have to see what happens next year, but we'll leave it there for now. Joe Dinnage, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Mark. Sounds great. Cheers.